let us begin or start with the first panel, where we want to discuss if we really need a manifest. Dominika already said it, or should it rather be an algorithm or a plea? And I would like to invite you here in the first rank to join me. It's Daniel Neugebauer, who's working for the Abbemuseum in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. He's head of the marketing department, and he's very much interested in inclusion issues. And he is as well part of the smARTplaces project, as well as Jasmin, who is from Dortmunder, the leading organization of smARTplaces project. And she will lead the bar camp, which will develop the manifest, the possible manifest. Then we have Martin Adam, developer who is since 2006, I think, who developed very early on augmented reality features, and who's very, please, yeah, was one of the first person developed AR features. Then we have Justus Herrmann. He describes himself as a radio socialized author and producer. He has a known company which is called Accident Labs, and he's working in the field of art criticism and art production, as well as mediation. And he did over 100 of features for radio broadcasting stations such as Deutschlandfunk or WDR. And then we have the fifth person on the panel, who is Oliver Rack. Oliver Rack is a central pioneer in the area in the field of open government for the consolidation of innovative capability and the resilience of state and community. And he is very active in the research and implementation in government labs. So you have to explain us what are those gov labs. At all administrative levels, from the EU Commission level to municipal administration, with the main goal really to empower the citizens. And I think this is a really good parallel to our topic we are discussing in the next 2 days, how to empower our audience, how to power our visitors. And the question is very big. We want to discuss here right now. Perhaps Justus, as a journalist, and from your point of view, to give us a short overview over the cultural landscape. What, in your opinion, should museums be? A temple of muses, a location of contemplation, or should we rather keep pace and catch up in order not to lose our relevance as for society as an island of knowledge? What is your point of view?
Well,
it should work. Yeah, just go ahead.
Should work right now. Maybe it works. Does it work? Yes. Well, it really is a big question, and I think, well, from my point of view, I work as a journalist and as a mediator in museums sometimes, and I try to work with the techniques and the means of radio journalism in the institutions. And on the other hand, I see the radio stations which have more and more difficulties with the art world, because the art world, I think, has, and the cultural institutions, they should really focus on producing meaning by itself, because the radio stations, for example, are more and more reducing their potential in really creating articles, really creating journalistic work on cultural aspects. For example, WDR has really halved, it's just the half of the capability. Well.
So what you observe is it's a very difficult situation, you would say, how the cultural landscape is at the moment, or what is your if you compare it to the cultural institutions, what you observe in your own field, in the radio broadcasting station, is it the same in the cultural sector?
Well, it's a question of targeting groups. They always call it targeting groups, and all the museums they try to have new audiences, of course, but they really don't know how. And this is I will give you one example. When I started to work, for example, with the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn, that was because there was some years ago, I think it was 2010. There was a big exhibition about Byzance, the art of Byzance. And it was a really big exhibition and a really expensive one. And as a journalist, I was interested in the idea of connecting it to the situation in Istanbul, Byzance, Constantinople, Istanbul, all that. But I realized that there was not in one single word Istanbul was mentioned in the whole communication process of the museum. The whole exhibition was about Byzance because everyone, the curators and the team was just focusing on Byzance, and all the communication didn't have in mind that it is really a subject of Istanbul. And Istanbul is, of course, a wonderful subject for community outreach, for the Turkish community, which is very strong in my area, and Turkish community, Kurdish community, and all that. And they totally forgot about that. So this I considered as my task to go inside and work with radiophonic techniques. I produced a soundscape of Istanbul, for example, and I invited some years ago, they were called intercultural communication agencies. They should do the communication with postcards and podcasts even in the communities. So, well, what I wanted to say is, yes, there is a big problem in the cultural institutions, because they don't. Sometimes they don't know really who they could reach and how they could transform their exhibitions to make the potential living.
That's what we try to address in the next 2 days, yes. to get to know who is this audience and how to develop tools and methods, how to evaluate this. Daniel, we have heard that we have to do something. How can we appeal to cultural institutions to break new ground in the form of a manifesto? Dominika already said it at the very beginning, or should it rather be an algorithm, or what is your point of view?
It can be anything. First of all, I was a bit repulsed by the idea of writing a manifesto for smARTplaces, because why would we need a manifesto? There have been a lot of manifestos written already, and if you look what it means, it's basically very much connected to the idea of the modernist project. And I think the big potential of the digital of a smart culture is to transgress something like a modernist attitude. And what you really need to ask yourself is, what kind of use do you want to generate with a manifesto? And this is, of course, always coming back to Wittgenstein, the most important question: don't ask for the meaning, ask for the use. And the idea of usership is something I would like to see discussed more in depth throughout the next days, because if we write another manifesto, it's like we're trying to establish something like a smart culturism. And if I'm in conversations with people from the cultural world, or especially from the world without, it's I can say that smart culture is very much associated with something that is market-driven. And we as cultural institutions, of course, need to claim the opposite position and find methods of resistance. So maybe we don't need a manifesto, but what we definitely need is an attitude and a very explicit political positioning in what we're doing. So a smart culture is not just a translation of what we have done before, but opens up windows to new ways of interactions and also to, hopefully, new political utopias.
Utopia, wow, great goal. Jasmin,
nothing less.
As you are leading the Barcamp Manifest, what would you respond? Do you agree with Daniel?
Well, I agree definitely, especially to the attitude point, because I think we need to find an inner attitude of how do we want to work. So, but I think on a practical level, this is the most important thing. So, especially if you think of developing something together, we should think of good local practice and not of best practice, which means basically we have the challenge, I think, on a practical, let's say, work level, that everything is developing so fast. We are talking about digital disruption. Everybody, if you're working in that field, sometimes have kind of an overkill. So how am I supposed to deal with that? And what we need is, or what I need in my daily work is, so how can this be adaptable and scalable to my actually local environment? Because Dortmund is a different city than Munich is. People are different there. My institution is different than other institutions are. So if you have a small city museum, you talk about the different setting of human resources even. So it has to be scalable, and it's not about developing strategies, really, I think. It's basically about setting how can we have a sustainable environment to ask the right questions and find our local answers, which fits to our local communities. And this is something that I feel is really missing right now in the cultural sector. We talk a lot. There are already a lot of manifests around that, of course, you can work with on a philosophical level, on a political level, but it doesn't fit to my institution in Dortmund. So what tools do I get so I can develop it for myself? I don't need others to develop this. I need to develop this with my local audience.
Can you give us some examples of sustainable tools, for example, which have to be developed within the smARTplaces project, such as the app, for example?
Maybe tools not in forms of, let's say, technology, because this is changing rapidly. And an app can be sustainable if the thing behind is sustainable thought. I'm thinking more, not maybe behaviors, but really capacity building within the institution. And this means we don't need new people, and we don't need more, what's the word in English, Stellen, more personal, for example. What we actually need is the freedom for people or for our colleagues or for myself to develop and to actually build up this capacity. And for this, you basically need training. So how do you offer an agile working environment where people can learn, where they can fail, and where you can prototype? So you don't have to develop everything really big. So from, okay, now I develop an app, and this will take me half a year, and it costs 40,000 euro. This is too big. So how can we prototype on a small, scalable level where we can try, where we can fail, and then next time we do it better or do it differently?
We are having a change management workshop led by Daniel, who the workshop is focusing on this, how to build up the capacity within the institution and how to make those processes smooth within the institution. Martin, if you report on your experiences with cultural institutions, with clients, which are very different from the very small library to huge institutions. What is your experience? How to approach, or how to make, or how to simplify this translation process, you are a developer, how to communicate with a cultural institution?
Well, working with cultural institutions is the hell. No, just kidding. It isn't. It's a lot of fun. But of course, it is a very, I think it's a very sustainable business right now. There's not that much flexibility by entering the digital world. And I think this is what Jasmin just said. It's not to create fixed technology to solve things, but to set up something where the flexibility is kept up, and that all my ideas can get developed in. So technology is a part of it, but it's not the main part. It's the stories, it's everything you do within it, but you need to have the flexibility to do it. And I know from my point of view as a developer, it has been normally that the developer developed an app and then he just grabbed the money and ran as far as he could, because support after developing apps is really a hell. But this is not the future, because it doesn't help anyone. It's app development is something we don't know much about today. It's we've done a lot of projects together with museums. It's not that we develop an app for a museum, but we develop apps with museums. We go very much into the whole process with it. We call it the 5 processes, like it's a storytelling, marketing, it's a communication, it's content development, it's design, and it's technology. But the technology is just the tool to display things. And we go in there with the institutions, find their specific stories about their own institution. We look at their content and find something new. And that's where we need the flexibility. Yes, we need the tools, but we also need the flexibility. And of course, there are some problems still, like working with content. It's always the same problem in the projects. Everybody underestimates how hard it is to get from a content to a digital content. There is a big process between this, and there's a big understanding process in it. And this is where always our projects get late, very late, and later, because this is such a huge topic, and everybody underestimates it. So take your time, and what Jasmin just said, start small.
Perhaps if you give us some insights, can you cite a worst and best case example of apps you developed together with cultural institutions? What were, or name just one huge problem you
The funny thing is, it's the same app. The best and the worst scenario. We've developed an app for the Freilichtmuseum in Detmold, which is an open-air museum. And we created a very cool story. It was a little girl, she used to live in this museum, and she's taking kids around and telling stories through audio guides and little games, and it's augmented reality, virtual reality, a lot of functionality. So it's a really, really cool app. But nobody is downloading this app. Because there are still two problems. The technology we used, beacons. Beacons are, don't think about beacons, never again. They are really a big problem. It didn't really work that well. And so the museum was really, they didn't really tell the visitors about this app because they haven't been sure about if it works. And, but even in the beginning, this is where we have to start a project. It's not just we are developing a story for the visitor. We are developing a story even for the people that work in the museum, because they have to sell this app later on, and they have to be engaged in this project very much. They have to put extra time to develop this app, because normally there's no special digital personnel to develop apps. It's normally communication or press or these parts of the museum who will do the app development, and they have to put 20% more extra time in doing this. And if they are not motivated enough, they won't put good time into it, and then the result won't be as good as it should be. So doing a story or developing a story means also involve the people from the museum.
So it's a question about turning content into smart content, and I think you would agree, Justus, because you mentioned as well kind of lack of communication when you mentioned the example of the Byzance and Istanbul exhibition. Would you agree?
Yes, Generally, yes, I would agree.
How to convert content into smart content for the right target group? That's your main point, I think, isn't it?
Well,
Oh, you disagree? Then
no, not really.
Please.
No, I lost my thoughts. Sorry, I'm sorry.
But if we talk about the target group and how to get to know our audience, we talk very fast about data and open data. Can you very shortly introduce this idea of open data and how, or give us an idea how we could adopt it to the cultural sector, Oliver?
Own data means to make data fluid for reuse in any other way. And there's a bunch of criteria to have them open, to have them in a, let's say, data lake, so that multi-stakeholders can do valorization with it, put an added value on it. So this is the idea. It's a technical, but also ideological idea to deal with data, and this is in Europe, especially in continental Europe, a special topic, data, because there are a lot of fears, and there is also the scenario that other geographies on the world has more competencies and has more data. So these different parameters play in this topic, which brings me again to the question of manifesto. We shouldn't overrate the word manifesto. I see manifesto as a processual tool, so that we can find an understanding what a stakeholder collective needs, what attitudes are involved, what are the visions, so that you have something in your hand. And this doesn't mean that is, we call it in Stein gemeißelt, that is fixed, so it's more a dynamic way. But there is a need, because there, for example, in the question of smart cities. What are smart cities? This began 10 years ago with a strong industrial technical view on what a smart city is. And now there's so much different views, so there is a need in collectives to talk about and to fix it a little bit. What are we talking about? And can we take this from our table when we need it, and to find our orientation again, and to, let's say, develop it further, to evaluate, not evaluate, to do. It's like a manifesto of an evolutionary manifesto. That's what I think about that.
So kind of process we have to kick off today and tomorrow, for example, but to continue and continuously develop further this paper.
Yes, but the understanding is very important, that there's an understanding. The things are so multiple in its meanings that in a collective it's more than ever important to have understanding, to try to find the most clear understanding out of something.
Jasmin, would you like to proceed with the working group to perhaps create this kind of understanding?
Yes, definitely, and maybe if I may add, I think the question is, there always can be also a decision against something, but this means that I understand what I'm deciding about, and I think this is something that is still missing in the cultural sector, the understanding of it, and then for me as an institution, or even for me as a staff member to make a decision, yes, I can work with this or not. But yeah, this is definitely missing. So I would be happy. So if I may invite now everyone, not everyone who is here, because this would be a little bit too big, and there are another great keynotes and actually coming up. But I'm happy to be your host, and Daniel is also joining, so that we actually discuss and find a way how we can create such a manifest, an algorithm together in an agile process. And this will be open, because we would like to develop this over the next 3 years, since there are 2 other conferences to come. So it would be great if you would join me today, or us today, to help us and actually make the kickoff or the first step in developing it together. So I think we meet at 1, right?
I think so too, yeah.
Yes, so actually now there are some great keynotes coming up here, and I would be happy to meet you at 1 in the Open Code exhibition. You see there a little table with a very fancy thing like called, what is this Microsoft thing which is up there?
It's a touch screen. A
Microsoft Hub, very fancy. So we got the best equipment to develop this together. So technology is not a problem in development. It might just be us. So please meet me at 1 p.m. At the Open Code exhibition.
Okay, thank you, Jasmin. I think we have to go deeper into this data topic, Oliver, because I think this data should as well be part of the manifesto. And I think in cultural institutions' mind is often this fear and how to draw boundaries, how to interact with data, and what should we know and what could we know. So please continue with this keynote of Oliver, and I hope we can better understand what possibilities we have to identify this visitor data, and how we can initiate as well in the cultural sector this change that comprehends data as a central resource. So please, Oliver, we are very much looking forward to your keynote, and we can join the audience again. Thanks.